sit down to watch a movie you love, and slowly but surely, as the film progresses, you start to sort of realise how weird and stupid the plot actually is? Well, recently that happened with me in Tangled. I started watching it and I thought, oh, this is kind of silly, isn't it? And yeah, brief disclaimer before I go any further, I still love the film, it's a true classic, all of that. Love it to pieces, etc, etc. But that's probably why this made me laugh so much. I mean, what's more fun than overanalyzing a piece of media that you actually enjoy? It's certainly more fun than raging about the issues you have with shows or films that you don't actually like, that's for sure. But yeah, I have a number of issues with the plot itself. Everything else, the animation, the design, the music, the acting, perfection. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Like I said, it's a true classic and one of the films that showed that Disney was getting back to what it was, after a lackluster decade during the 2000s. But for me, the actual narrative no longer makes that much sense. And so whilst I can watch and enjoy the film, for a smartass like myself, it can get a bit annoying. And yes, for this one, we'll only be talking about the film. There have been some continuations of the story with the show, but I haven't actually watched it, so I can't really comment on that side of things too much if anything's explicitly explained there. I mean, I'll take a look at the wiki from time to time, but I'm not sitting down to watch the whole thing right this second. Okay, so let's begin, I suppose. So the early crux of the plot is that Rapunzel is going to be born in the kingdom of Corona, and her mother is very sickly, and the only way for her to survive is if the king's able to find a magical one-of-a-kind flower that has healing powers. And that's all just fine. Normal fairy tale stuff, until you start to wonder, how the hell does the king even know about the flower? Right, so the Sundrop flower falls to Earth, and it's some sort of magical drop of sunlight or something like that. It falls to Earth and the flower's born, and at some point, pretty soon after this happens, Mother Gothel discovers the flower and uses it to gain essential immortality so long as she uses its powers regularly. And she hoards it for like 400 years. Until eventually, the king learns of the flower, and thus they send out their goons to go and harvest it. And they use the flower to brew a potion that will save the queen, and thus little baby Rapunzel in her tummy. And so I'll return to my quibble. How did the king even know about this flower? Like, Mother Gothel has been monopolizing this plant for 400 years. From before there even was a kingdom there. And based on the events of the film, she finds the flower immediately after it blooms and starts using it. And surely she couldn't have gotten away with using this flower for immortality, unless she just straight up never told anybody about it. So already, it makes you wonder how the hell the king even knew to look for this thing. I mean shit, their whole kingdom has a sun motif. Why was this one little old lady able to keep the flower hidden on those cliffs where it first grew for so long, if apparently this was some sort of legendary flower? Why was it not taken by the kingdom long ago? Taken to be a relic of the kingdom? Used by the royal family for immortality? Surely that's the kind of thing a king and queen would actually do. And so, it's never really explained. How did anybody actually learn about this flower once Gothel got her hands on it? Did she actually brag about this? Ugh, oh well. Moving on. The flower is then used to heal the queen. And I mean, dude, you wasted it, man. Pretty sure it heals just from exposure to the song, right? And I mean, surely that means that they could have experimented with it a little bit. If Gothel, who was old and clearly on her last legs, had enough time to figure it out, surely the great minds of Corona could have done so too, right? Anyway, they use up the flower, and thus baby Rapunzel is born infused with that power. Alright? Yep, that's all well and good. But then, Mother Gothel somehow breaks in and steals her from the royal nursery. And here's where I start to go, wait, what? Okay, from that scene, we see that Mother Gothel, as an old woman, manages to get into the castle, take the baby, and gets seen doing so. She then escapes the castle and the town and heads off into the wilderness where she's not seen again and raises Rapunzel as her own. But how is this possible? Okay, Mother Gothel, as we see, is old as hell in that scene. And are you seriously telling me that this old-ass woman was able to scale the castle walls and then climb up onto the balcony? Because, I mean, one, she's old as hell, but two, she has no climbing equipment or anything. She's just free climbing it. How did she manage to do this? She then climbs back down, despite the alarm being raised while she's on the balcony, and then evades all of the guards and all of the search parties, despite them being able to find some random-ass flower on some obscure cliff in the middle of nowhere. And then nobody for 18 years is ever able to come across this tower. I'm sorry, but what? It's just hidden by some vines. All of this just feels so unlikely. The reward for finding the flower must have been huge. Surely even bigger for finding the king's only child. Surely every bounty hunter in the kingdom would have been hunting forever. This is his only kid, his heir to the throne. They would never give up searching for her, and the reward money would only grow and grow and grow every year. Somebody would have stumbled across that tower, I'm sorry. I mean, shit. It's not even that far away. And that's not even mentioning how inept the guards have to be for the plot to have allowed this old woman to escape with the baby in the first place. How did they not catch her? She's old. What a joke. And so to rationalize this, to explain how she got in and got out and then never got found or anything like that, you have to assume she's a witch, right? I mean, she did figure out the song to trigger the flower, although I guess you could argue that the flower would respond to anybody, and it doesn't necessarily need that specific song. After all, it worked in the tonic that the king prepared for the queen, didn't it? Regardless, to escape, surely she would have had to use some magic. Otherwise, nah. But her using magic then opens up other plot holes, like why did she never ever ever use magic again during the course of the story? She just seems like an ordinary, crazy, narcissistic old woman that wants to hold on to her youth at any cost. There's no real hint of any special powers that would have most definitely helped her over the course of the story and prevented her ultimate defeat, and so suddenly it becomes quite confusing. Is she a witch that used magical powers to steal Rapunzel and then just forgot to use them again? Or is she a normal person with inhuman strength and endurance, whilst the guards and citizens of Corona are simply a bunch of incompetents? After all, like I said, the entrance to the meadow, it's only behind some vines. Nobody ever explored there until Flynn Rider just stumbled across it. Nobody searched it. Nobody noticed the really tall, fancy tower with no door and got curious. But then again, I guess you can explain that away because it's shown that the guards are truly incompetent. And this is shown again later in the film, because after the kidnap of the princess, you'd assume the security on the castle would be ironclad. Nobody's getting in, nobody's getting out. But for some reason, Flynn Rider and his crew break in broad daylight. And then they escape from the castle with the princess's crown on foot. And they're out of there before any guards show up. Wow, some people are getting hanged tomorrow. Anyway, the next thing that's a bit weird for me is that seemingly nobody notices who the hell Rapunzel actually is when she turns up. And you might think, well, duh, she grew up. But like, looking at the characters, she's a pretty unique looking woman. In the film, it seems like almost everybody else has brown hair. Hers is blonde, and not just blonde, it's like gold. Spun gold. And when she meets the bounty hunters, none of them even have an inkling that it could be her. Like, surely even then, her bounty must be legendary. The reward for bringing back the heir to the throne would be ridiculous. Surely, right? And not even a single one of these dudes has that epiphany? Hell, she even mentions the Lantern Festival, which they do to pray for her return, and nobody suspects a thing. Same with the townsfolk. She literally stands next to the mural of her, and nobody thinks, oh wow, her hair's exactly the same, and she has those green eyes. Nobody else in town has those features apparently? Like on a normal day, I get it, right? People are not going to notice. But people are staring at her. She's getting involved, and it's the day of the festival. The festival is that evening. Surely her likeness would be burned into people's minds for that lone day. So I do find that a bit strange. But then conversely, how the hell do the king and queen trust that their daughter has even returned to them at the end of the film? Because simply put, she doesn't look like the blonde-haired baby that they knew. She looks like her mum. But I'm also sure that other random peasants would have brown hair and green eyes too. So how could you trust that? And plus, she's being returned by Flynn Rider, an outlaw with literally everything to gain by having his girlfriend be the returned princess, namely a royal pardon and a nice, comfy position as a princely consort. How could you ever trust this man to be the one to deliver your kid to you? Sounds like a repeat of Anastasia Romanov to me. Surely there'd always be that inkling of doubt of, I wonder if this is actually her. But yeah, that's really all I can think of at the moment. And so I guess I'll just end it here with the reminder that this was all in jest. It's just my opinion, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Tangled? Do you think the plot's a bit nonsensical? Got too many holes? Or maybe you disagree with me? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.